And this is Mike for Working Class Thoughts. So today's episode is actually going to be on Albert Fish, better known as the Gray Man or the Brooklyn Vampire. So Albert hold on one second. Albert Fish was actually born May 19th, 1870 in Washington, D.C. Now, his father's name was Randall and his mother's name was Ellen. Now, his father was actually an English immigrant. However, his mother was Scots-Irish American. So get this, his father was actually 43 years older than his mother. He was actually 75 years old when Albert was born. Now, Albert was actually the youngest child of three. His siblings' names were Walter, Annie, and Edwin. He wanted to be known as Albert after he learned of a dead sibling. So he had a bad nickname, however, that he got at the orphanage, where he actually spent much of his childhood on and off at. The nickname was actually Ham and Eggs. He was taunted by it throughout his whole childhood. Now you got to keep in mind, however, that Albert's family actually suffered a lot of mental illness. His uncle actually suffered from mania, and his brother Walter was actually confined at a young age in a state mental institution. Now, his sister was diagnosed with a mental disability as well. So all three family members, all three of his children had severe mental problems, is what they were stating. But it goes farther than that, because even his mother had visual problems as well as suffer from hallucinations. Now, Randall's father, he was a riverboat captain by occupation. However, later, in 1870, he actually switched careers and became a fertilizer manufacturer. Now, however, his father actually died in 1875 at the Washington, D.C. 6th Street Station from a massive heart attack. However, if you ever wanted to go send your condolences to Albert Fish's father, you could find him located in a grave. His gravestone number is R96189 and is located at the Congressional Cemetery. Now, Alan Fish, once Albert's father died, put him in St. John's Orphanage in Washington, D.C. Now, or in Washington. So it was here, actually, that Albert was severely abused. So it happened so much often, though, that Albert said that he began enjoying all of the abuse and all the physical pain. Albert stated that it was there until I was 9 that I began to go so wrong. It was there, he said, that I unmercifully got whipped. He stated, I saw many boys doing things that boys should not do with one another. So, all around, 1880, Albert's mother, she finally managed to get a government job. So she promptly removed Albert from the orphanage as soon as she was financially able to. So around 1882 or so, Albert was 12 years old and he began a sexual relationship with a telegraph boy. So that guy actually introduced young Albert to drinking urine as well as eating feces. Albert also started visiting public bathhouse where he enjoyed watching other boys slowly undress. His whole life, Albert would write obscene letters to different women's, whose names he actually got from classified ads in a newspaper, as well as different wedding agencies. So it was around 1880, Albert moved to New York City, and Albert said as soon as he got there, he became a hooker to make ends meet. He also began raping young boys on the side. In 1898, his mother actually arranged a marriage with a lady named Anne Mary Hoffman. She was 9 years younger than Albert. Together, they managed to have 6 children: Albert Jr., Anna, Gertrude, Eugene, John, and Henry. So all of 1898, he worked as a house painter to make ends meet. He said he could not stop molesting children, however. His preference was actually boys as young as 6 years old. So Albert once told a story. He said that he took on a male lover, and he decided to take him to a wax museum. And Albert said he was particularly fascinated by the bisection point of the penis, meaning the head. So Albert stated that after that, I became obsessed with sexual mutilation. So in 1903, Albert was arrested and charged with grand larceny. He was found guilty and served time at Sing Sing, in fact. So in 1910, Albert was working out in Wilmington, Delaware. And to his place, they began a So while he was there, he met a 19-year-old man named Thomas Keaton. He actually took Thomas to his place immediately. And they began a sadomasochistic relationship. Nobody knows, actually, if Albert forced Thomas to do the things that Thomas said he did or not. Albert did say, however, that Thomas was mentally disabled. It took Albert 10 days to take Thomas to a farmhouse where he began to torture Thomas. Albert said that he tortured him for 2 weeks straight. This means that Albert purposely prolonged the torture to keep him alive. He did eventually tie up Thomas, and then he cut half of his penis off. Albert said, I will never forget his screams or the looks that he gave me. Albert originally planned to cut up his body and then take it home. However, he stated he was afraid of the warm weather would draw attention to him on the way home. Albert said that he decided to put peroxide all over the wound and wrap it in Vaseline. And then he covered it with a bandana. He left Thomas a $10 bill. He kissed him goodbye, and then he left. Albert said, I took the first train I could to get back home. He stated, I never tried to find out if he lived, nor did I ever care to find out. January of 1917, a massive event happened in Albert Fish's life. His wife left him for another man named John Strobel. He was a handyman who lived with the Fish family. Albert then was forced to raise his children as a single parent. Albert stated that his wife left him. When she left him, she took literally everything that he owned. He also stated that he began to have auditory hallucinations like his mother suffered. One time, Albert wrapped himself in a carpet. He stated that John the Apostle told him to do it. It was also the same time that Albert decided to begin to experiment with self-harm. Albert particularly enjoyed putting needles deep into his groin area and his abdomen. The interesting part is that, to me, is that he left the needles inside of him, like literally inside his body. So, once after his arrest, they did x-rays on him, and it actually showed at the very least, they determined he had 29 needles left in his body. Albert also enjoyed hitting himself with a nail-studded paddle, all right? And he would stick wool on the end of it, like a wool pad. And then he would douse it with lighter fluid, and then he would shove it inside his anal cavity, and then he would light it on fire and just let it slowly burn down. So, interesting enough, even though he did all of these things, there is no evidence that he actually was physically or sexually abused in his childhood. He did encourage the children and his friends, however, meaning his children, to paddle their butts with the same nail-studded paddle that he used for his own sexual pleasure. Albert also began developing a growing obsession with cannibalism. Often, he made his meals consisting solely of raw meat. He also served it to his children. 1919, Albert stabbed a mentally challenged disabled boy in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. So Albert's preferred victims was mentally handicapped or African American. That was his preferred victims. Albert stated that his reasons was they would not be missed. Nobody would actually come looking for him whenever he was in the process of killing them or out there. So Albert would actually torture and mutilate and murder the children with a meat cleaver, a butcher knife, and a small hacksaw. So July 19, 1924, Albert found 8-year-old Patrice Kill playing alone on their parents' Staten Island farm. He offered her money to come help him look for a type of certain plant. She was about to leave when her mother chased Albert Fish away. Albert did leave, however. He later returned during 1924. Albert was 54 years old at the time, and he suffered from psychosis. So he felt that God was commanding him to torture and kill children. And shortly before the abduction of Grace Budd, Albert attempted to test his murder kit on a child. He had been molesting named Cyril Quinn. Quinn and his friend was playing on a sidewalk. Albert asked them if they had eaten lunch yet. When they replied no, he invited them to come up to his apartment. While two boys were wrestling on Albert's bed, they moved the mattress underneath. Oh, yeah. And when they moved it, they found Albert's knife, a small hacksaw, and a meat cleaver. They got spooked, and they initially just, ran out of the apartment. Sorry, guys. It's still like 6 in the morning here, so. Albert remarried on February 6, 1930, to Estella Willocks of Waterloo, New York. She divorced him after only 1 week, however, of marriage. Albert was arrested again, May in 1930, for sending obscene letters to a woman who answered a advertising ad for a maid. Following that arrest, plus his arrest in 1931, he was sent to Bellevue Psychiatric Hospital to be watched. Now, May 23rd, 1928, Albert saw a classified ad in a Sunday edition of the New York World. He said that he had read the ad and that it said 18-year-old young man wished for a portion or a position in country. So Edward Budd, 406 West 15th Street. So on May 28th, 1928, Albert was 58 years old, and he went to go visit the Budd family home. It was in Manhattan. They thought that he was there to hire Edward. Now, Andrew, later, he planned to tie Edward up. Sorry, not ride up. Tie Edward up. And mutilate him, then leave him, to slowly bleed out to death. Now, when Albert got there, however, he introduced himself as Frank Howard, a farmer from Farmingdale, New York. Albert promised to hire both Edward and his friend Willie. He said he would send for them in a few days. Albert, however, failed to show up. Now, he sent a telegraph stating that he was sorry and set a letter day. So Albert showed up and he met Grace Budd. He then changed his mind and now intended to kill her. So once he did, he quickly made up a story about having to attend his niece's birthday party. He did manage to convince her parents, however, Delia Flanagan and Albert Budd, the first, to let Grace go with them. Grace had a younger sister, Patrice, and two older brothers, Edward and George Budd, and youngest, Albert Budd III. Grace left and would never be seen again. The police arrested 66-year-old Charles Edward Pope on September 5th, 1930, because he was an initial suspect. He was accused by his ex-wife, and he spent 108 days in jail to be found not guilty and let go. So, November of 1934, an anonymous letter was sent to her parents' home. This led the police to Albert, and the mother was illiterate, so she could not read the letter herself. So her son did. The unaltered letter, complete with Albert's misspelling and grammar efforts, can be seen in it. However, I will try to include these letters in a slide if I could find them. So police did investigate the letter, and it contained an acute murder and was found to be accurate, as well as the kidnapping and other events, although it was impossible to verify if Albert really ate all the parts of Grace's body that he claimed to. So this letter was delivered in an envelope that had a hexagram emblem with the letters NYBCABA, representing the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. Sorry if the punctuation's off again. A janitor told the police that he left it at his rooming house when he moved out, that Albert did. The landlady said that Albert checked out of the room a few days earlier. She stated Albert's son sent him money and asked her to hold on Albert's next check for him. Albert returned, seeing William F. King. Albert agreed to go with them to the police station, where he showed a razor blade. Albert made no attempt to deny the murder of Grace Budd, saying he meant to kill Edward Budd. Grace was a mistake. Just kind of like victim by circumstance. I couldn't get to him, so he figured he'd just go for her. So Albert said that he never wanted to rape the young girl at first, and he later told his attorney while kneeling on Grace's chest and strangling her, he had two hallucinations while it was going on. The information was used at his trial to make the claim that the kidnapping was actually purely sexually motivated, and they avoided any mention whatsoever of cannibalism at his trial. So now let's actually journey into Albert's other crimes for a second. July 14th, 1924, a 9-year-old Francis Mcdonald was reported missing. He failed to return home after playing catch with his friends in his Portland-Richmond neighborhood on Staten Island. A big search started, and eventually his body was found hanging in a tree in a wooded section by his home. He had been sexually assaulted, then strangled with his own trouser suspenders. He had suffered extensive lacerations to his legs and stomach area. His whole left hamstring had been entirely stripped of flesh. Albert refused to take responsibility, however, for this crime, although he later stated he intended on castrating the boy, but fled when he heard police searching and got closer. The victim's friends told police he was taken by an elderly man with a gray mustache. A neighbor told the police that she had witnessed the boy with an elderly man walking nearby in the woods. The victim's mother stated to the police she saw an elderly man earlier that day, stuffing down the street, mumbling to himself and making queer hand motions. He had thick gray hair and a drooping gray mustache. It resulted in the suspect being nicknamed the Gray Man. Now, the murder remained unsolved until the murder of Grace Budd, when several eyewitnesses and farmers positively ID'd Albert Fish. It was announced that Albert Fish would be tried. Albert denied the charges in court adamantly. March 1935, after the conclusion of his trial for the Budd murder and the confession to the killing of Billy Caffey, Albert confirmed to investigators that he also raped Francis Mcdonald, and he was dubbed by the press the most vicious child strangler in all of criminal history. So, February 11th, 1927, 3-year-old Billy Beaton and his 12-year-old brother was playing in their apartment hallway in Brooklyn with 4-year-old Billy Gaffney. The older one left for his apartment. Both the youngest boys disappeared. Beaton was found on the roof of the apartments. When asked by reporters, the oldest of the kids stated the boogeyman took him. The older boy's body was never located. Originally, Peter Kozwinski was a suspect. Then Joseph Meehan, a Brooklyn trolley operator, saw a picture of Albert Fish in a newspaper and identified him as the man he saw February 11th, 1927. The old man had been trying to quiet a little boy who was sitting with them. The boy was not wearing a jacket and was crying for his mother, and then was dragged by the old man off the trolley. So, back at the station, police learned Albert Fish was an employee for a house painter by a Brooklyn real estate company during February 1927, and it just so happened on the day of the boy's disappearance, he was working only a couple of miles away from the boy's apartment. Now, I will provide Albert's letter to his attorney about the murder. Elizabeth Gaffney visited Sing Sing accompanied by a detective and 2 other men. She wanted to ask Albert about her son's death while looking into his eyes. Albert refused to speak to her. He began to weep, though, and asked, please, can I be left alone? After 2 hours of questioning they actually left. She was convinced that Albert Fish was not her son's killer. So, Albert's trial for the murder of Grace Budd began March 11th, 1935 in White Plains, New York. Frederick B. D. Deese was the judge. Albert F. Gallinger was the prosecuting attorney. The trial lasted for 10 whole days. Albert pleaded insanity and claimed to have a direct order from God himself, who was commanding him to kill children. Professional psychologists testified about Albert's sexual fetishes, which included sadism, masochism, cannibalism, voyeurism, exhibitism, like public, like to be seen nude in public, having sex in public, anything that was degrading, all of that kind of stuff, BDSM, all of it. He was suffered from pedophilia as well, he said. They said Albert was a psychiatric phenomenon. They knew of no cases of one man having all these sexual fetishes at the exact same time. You see, it is a very unique thing for somebody to have sexual fetishes in many different areas, all at the same time. That's very rare. Now, what I'm saying is I'm going to talk a little bit after this, after the research. So, anyways, a witness stated Albert's obsession with religion and was the focus of being on Abraham and Isaac, Genesis 22, chapter 1 through 24. They believed Albert believed that sacrificing a boy would find him penance for his own sins here on earth. That even though the act was wrong, angels would prevent it if God did not wish for it to happen. He further detailed Albert had a love of cannibalism, which in Albert's mind actually equaled out to Holy Communion. They said that he simply is insane. Some professional witnesses said Albert was no different than everyone else walking on the street and was not mentally sick at all. That they are actually common fetishes for people to have. After the trial, none of the jurors doubted Albert Fish was insane. However, they stated he should be executed instead of locked up in a criminal mental facility. The judge ordered Albert Fish to death. Albert arrived at prison March of 1935. He was executed January 16, 1936, in an electric chair at Sing Sing. So, at 11:09 p.m., he was announced dead. He was buried in the Sing Sing Cemetery. So if you ever want to visit him, that's where you can find him. All right. So a little bit more about Albert Fish that I was thinking about. You know, often whenever we look at true crime, we look at the suspect as a whole and we look at how their lives reflected. In Albert's case, Albert's Fish, although he was an atrocious serial killer, I mean, he was just as insane as they come. You cannot find justification for his crimes. They are just sickening, what he did. However, whenever you look at that time period, I would challenge anybody to look at mental institutions during the 20s, 30s, 40s, the early 1900s, and you'll start to understand the amount of torture, the amount of undocumented things. They were like guinea pigs, treated with they would perform experiments on them. Basically, no one cared about them, so they could these doctors could do whatever they whatever they wanted to them. Let me put it that way. On top of that, although there was no physical evidence of any sexual abuse in his early childhood, one would argue that the actions and the way that they happen, one would almost argue nowadays, with the technology that we have now, one would almost argue that somewhere at some point, somebody had to do something to Albert to cause him to become like that. Now, we do know at a very young age, just like in the research material stated, that there was a man that got him into eating feces and drinking urine, which led him into the whole going to the wax museum and noticing the penis shaft and wanting to mutilate it, and he fell in love with that. So Albert's unique in those aspects. Hold on 1 minute. Oh, shit. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Hope everybody's still with me. Kids are getting up. Like I was saying earlier, it's kind of like, early here. Anyways, like I was stating, I mean, one cannot say, hey, man, this guy's all right. He did horrible crimes. He really did. When we're talking about his victims, we're not talking about just, a basic BDSM. This is extreme. He would mutilate the bodies. He would cut off parts of the body. He would eat the body parts, although there's no physical evidence. He definitely felt like he did. So, This also led him to be dubbed the Vampire of Brooklyn. There is some people that have stated that there's evidence out there that he even claimed that he drank the victim's blood, and that's why he was nicknamed the Vampire of Brooklyn, New York. And which is really weird to me because he was. I need to actually look into that a little bit further, so don't quote me on that. Because his primary hunting ground as a predator was Staten Island, New York. It seems to be, but like all, he did travel, like, like the research. So, I mean, he did travel around, so he might have got around there. I'm not too sure. I just didn't want you guys to, take that head on. But anyways, like I said, it is like 6:32 in the morning here, and I got to get my kids off to school, and do that whole little bit. So, it's a little bit shorter of an episode. I hope everybody enjoyed it. This has been Albert Fish. Like I said, it's going to be true crime, and I'm going to be going back and forth, so you guys can expect that. But this has been Albert Fish. One of my most I find one of the most interesting of serial killers, both for the time period, his mythology, and how he did stuff. However, I highly recommend everybody look into it. There's a good movie out there called The Gray Man. In fact, I think you can actually find it on YouTube for free. It's called The Gray Man, and it's actually pretty good too. So everybody look into that. Once again, it's been Mike for Working Class Thoughts. Peace, love, and good vibes. Everybody have a great day. And I'll be back real quick with more episodes coming your way.